He was sweeping the marble floor of a skyscraper lobby when it happened. A little girl, no more than 7, stood frozen, her tiny hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face. Executives in expensive suits stared, unsure what to do, while the man they barely noticed every day reached into his pocket. Moments later, shimmering bubbles floated through the air, and the storm in her eyes began to fade. What he didn't know was that someone was watching, someone powerful enough to change his life forever. Daniel Carter's mornings began long before the city stirred. By the time the first executives of Sterling Dynamics arrived, the lobby floors already gleamed under the warm lights, a quiet reflection of the man who cleaned them. At 42, Daniel had learned to make himself invisible. To most, he was just the black janitor who emptied bins and polished brass railings. Few knew that years ago, he'd been a respected special education teacher, armed with a master's degree in autism spectrum disorders. Life had taken an unexpected turn, forcing him into night shifts and silent hallways. Still, Daniel found dignity in his work, even if others looked past him. That morning, as he swept near the grand glass entrance, his thoughts were on finishing early to help his teenage daughter with her art project. But something unusual caught his attention. A small figure standing by the revolving doors, motionless. The girl's tiny shoulders trembled. Around her, well-dressed strangers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. Daniel didn't know it yet, but in the next few minutes, his quiet, unnoticed life would collide with unimaginable power and expose truths the people around him never saw coming. The girl's name was Lily. Her eyes were wide, her breathing shallow, and her small hands pressed tightly over her ears. Daniel recognized the signs instantly: sensory overload, the kind he'd seen in his years teaching children on the autism spectrum. The sound of clacking heels and ringing elevators ricocheted off the marble walls, each echo a hammer in the child's world. Around her, executives in $1,000 suits froze, whispering to each other, unsure of what to do. Some kept walking, pretending not to notice. Others watched from a distance, their expressions tinged with impatience, as if Lily's distress was an inconvenience in their polished corporate morning. Daniel dropped his mop, reached into his cart, and pulled out a small bottle of soap bubbles, something he always carried for moments like this. Within seconds, iridescent orbs floated through the air, catching the light from the skylight above. Lily's rigid shoulders softened. Her hands slowly lowered from her ears. She reached out, a faint smile trembling at the edges of her lips, as if she'd stepped out of the storm and into a quiet, magical place. Daniel thought nothing of it. This was simply what you did when a child needed help. But up on the mezzanine, behind a wall of tinted glass, Victoria Hale watched every move. Billionaire CEO of Sterling Biotech, she was known for her sharp mind and sharper instincts. And what she saw in Daniel wasn't just kindness, it was expertise. Later that day, Daniel was summoned to her office. The receptionist barely met his eyes as she gestured for him to sit, her tone clipped, her expression neutral. When Victoria walked in, she didn't ask about the floors or the cleaning schedule. Instead, she asked about Lily. She asked about his background. And when he explained, his years as a special education teacher, his master's degree, his quiet shift into janitorial work, her brow furrowed. Victoria made him an offer to work with Lily directly. But Daniel had one condition: no cameras, no timers, no performance reports. Just trust. She agreed. The next morning, Daniel arrived with his 16-year-old daughter, Amara. She brought paints, brushes, and a small canvas. Lily, hesitant at first, began mixing colors with Amara, her little hands leaving streaks of blue and gold. Hours passed before anyone noticed something extraordinary. Lily spoke her first word in days. But as Daniel began helping Lily, he started noticing something troubling. Her doctors, Dr. Preston and Dr. Morgan, sent thick, expensive reports, nearly identical from week to week. The same phrases, the same recommendations, the same invoices with staggering numbers. And yet Lily's progress was credited to long-term treatment, not to the breakthroughs happening in the art room. Daniel had seen this before. Families drained financially, strung along by professionals more interested in bills than children. And now, those same forces were operating in the very building where he mopped floors. He started quietly collecting evidence, copies of reports, payment records, even overheard conversations during his night shifts. Each piece painted a darker picture. What Daniel didn't know was that exposing this truth would put him directly in the crosshairs of people with money, power, and a deep interest in keeping the system exactly as it was. The boardroom was silent except for the steady hum of the air vents. Daniel stood at the far end of a long mahogany table, a stack of documents in his hands. Across from him sat Dr. Preston and Dr. Morgan, flanked by lawyers in tailored suits. At the head of the table was Victoria, her expression unreadable. Daniel's heart pounded, but his voice was steady as he laid down report after report. Identical phrasing, inflated charges, fabricated progress notes. He projected scans onto the wall, the text glowing under the recessed lighting. Every page told the same story. Wealthy families billed for treatments that were never tailored, never effective, never meant to end. Preston leaned forward, smirking. "And we're supposed to take the word of a janitor?" His tone dripped with contempt, the word janitor a weapon. The room shifted, eyes glancing away, hands folding, the familiar silence that comes when someone like Daniel is reminded of his place. But Victoria didn't look away. She asked Daniel to continue. He revealed financial ledgers, millions in overcharges, audio clips of the doctors mocking parents behind closed doors, even a signed memo instructing staff to recycle old treatment plans to maintain cash flow. With each revelation, the tension thickened. Preston slammed his palm on the table, his voice sharp. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Daniel met his gaze. "Yes, and I know who you've been stealing from." For a moment, no one breathed. Then Victoria slid the evidence toward her legal counsel. "We're done here," she said, her voice cold as steel. It was the moment Daniel realized the risk he'd taken. In front of him were men with enough influence to ruin him. Behind him were children like Lily, counting on him to finish what he started. And in that tense, suspended silence, one thought burned in his mind. There was no going back. Within weeks, the scandal broke. Dr. Preston and Dr. Morgan lost their medical licenses, were fined $2 million each, and watched their reputations collapse in public disgrace. Parents who had been quietly suffering came forward with their own stories. Families bled dry, children neglected, and voices ignored simply because those responsible believed no one would challenge them. Victoria and Daniel launched the Carter Hale program, a radical approach to supporting autistic children without the bureaucracy and profit-driven traps that had failed Lily. The program's first year saw 237 children thrive, 500 educators trained, and Daniel's unconventional methods adopted by 43 universities. Through it all, Daniel kept his old janitor's uniform framed in his office, not as a reminder of humility, but as a testament to how quickly the world decides your worth based on the color of your skin and the title on your name tag. He had been dismissed, underestimated, and nearly silenced, until the truth spoke louder. Lily began calling him Daddy Daniel. Her paintings, sold in galleries, funded new inclusion programs. Victoria left her CEO position to run the foundation full-time. And Daniel? He stood on the stage of the National Autism Congress, as Lily introduced herself to the world and said, "Being different doesn't mean being broken." But beneath the applause, one truth remained. Daniel's story wasn't just about one girl, two corrupt doctors, or a single act of courage. It was about the countless times people of color are seen last, heard last, and believed last until they forced the world to look closer. How many Daniels have been ignored? And how many more will it take before we start seeing people for who they are, not what we assume them to be? What did you think about Daniel's journey, from being overlooked as a janitor to changing hundreds of lives? If stories like this inspire you, tap the like button and share it so more people can hear them. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that challenge how we see the world.